Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we are going to be continuing on with our C# tutorial series, and in this tutorial we are going to be taking a look at the if, else, and else if statements. So if, else, and else if allow us to make decisions in C#. Alright, so let's say we want to figure out whether or not the user is old enough to, say, old enough to drink, for example. If you're making an application for a bar, you can do that with if statements and else statements. If you want to determine, say, the tax rate that you need to charge based on the user's state that they live in, that's another use case. However, there are more efficient ways of doing it, and we'll talk about that later. But you can use if, else, and else if for that if you really wanted to. Ultimately, they are used for making decisions. So any kind of decision that you need to make, you can do with an if statement. All right. So let's use the bar example. If you, generally speaking, in the United States, you need to be 21 in order to drink. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a small little program here to start off with that asks the user what their age is. And we can do this by saying, not system, console.write what is your age. Okay, if Visual Studio would cooperate with me. What is your age? Okay, so there we go. We now have our prompt. And we're going to get user input from the console, and that user input is going to be, or rather, it's going to be a string. Age string equals console dot read line, like that. Okay, and so now if we run our code, doing a control F5, it's going to ask us to enter an age. I'm going to say 12. And so far, it does nothing except store that value that we entered in the age string variable. But we want to test. We want to test this value to see if it's 21 or not, right? So first thing that we need to do is we need to parse that string into an integer. And we can do this by saying int age is equal to int.parse age string, like that. Now this could throw an exception and all that stuff, and that, and we'll learn about how to handle that later on in the series. But for now, we are going to ensure that we do enter a valid value that can be parsed into an integer. And so now we display the prompt, request input from the user, and once that user input is successfully stored, then we go to parse it into the actual age. And here is where we can test those values for validity. In order to do an if statement, we can do if opening and closing parenthesis and braces. So opening and closing braces. Let's go back into the opening and closing parenthesis, and this is where our condition lays. This is where we put our condition. So remember how in the previous videos we covered logical and relational operators? Well, here is a place where those become much more useful. Okay, so we're gonna say if age is greater than or equal to 21, then we can print out console write line, you are old enough. Like that. And so that's great. But what if we want to output a message if the user isn't old enough? Because we want to make sure that they're old enough, right? Well, we can say else like that. All right. Okay. And so here we can say console.writeLine, you are not old enough. Okay. So this else statement that we have here, else open closing curly brackets rather, basically says if the above condition isn't true, do this. So if you are, if you're younger than 21, this else condition will run. So let's go ahead and do the Control F5. Okay, and so here we're asking for input. I'm going to say I am 23. It says you are old enough. And that's great. But what if I run it again and I say 18? It says you are not old enough. And that's exactly what we want. Now, that's great and all, but what if we want to have multiple conditions, not just one? Well, that's where else if comes in. And to demonstrate else if, right, we're going to use a completely different example. Okay. And this example is going to be, okay, so here in the United States we have our Congress, we have the presidency and all that stuff. Well, the presidency and Congress have two different age requirements. And so we're going to make an if else statement block that determines what you're old enough to run for. Because election season's coming up, and this is actually pretty relevant example. We're just going to deal with the age requirement. That's it. Nothing else. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started with this. So first things first is we already have the age and age string up above, so we don't need to change that. However, we're going to write another if statement. If, okay, go back into the parentheses, and we're going to say age is greater than or equal to 30, and age is less than 35. we'll just say is, okay. Yeah, we'll just do if the age is greater than 30, greater than or equal to 30, so if this is true, you can run for the Senate or House of Representatives. And we can say console.writeLine you are eligible to run for the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives. Okay. Now here's where our else if condition can come in. Else if age is greater than or equal to 35. So if the age is greater than or equal to 35, then you are eligible to not only run for Senate or the House of Representatives, but at age 35 you can also run for the presidency of the United States. So we can say console.writeLine you can run for Senate House of Representatives and the presidency. And otherwise, everything else, you can say console.writeLine you are ineligible to run for federal office. Okay. So let's go back up to the initial condition. Okay. So what this is doing now is we're saying if you are of the age 30 or greater, so if you're the age of 30 and beyond, you're able to run for United States Senate and for the House of Representatives. If that is, so now I guess the next thing that it'll do is it'll go through all the different else, if, all that stuff. It'll go through all that stuff. And the next condition, then after it evaluates the if, it'll say, else if your age is greater than or equal to 35. Then it'll run the code inside that block. Otherwise, if you're lower than the age of 30, it'll give you, you're not eligible to run for federal office. Okay? So, if we run our code now, and let's say I'm 23, okay? Which I am. And you can see now, it said I'm old enough to drink, but after those if conditions were evaluated, it went down to our next ones, which has the else if. And because I'm 23, I am not eligible for federal office. But let's run this again. And let's say we are 40, okay? And you can see that it said you're old enough to drink, and it said, oh, well, you're old enough to run for the House of Representatives and the Senate. But it didn't say anything about the presidency. Now, why is that? Well, the reason for that is because the C# compiler found the first match that best matched the input, and it used that instead. So if you want to avoid something like this happening, your best bet is to change the order of the conditions to be the most specific on top going to the least specific down below. So that if you go from the least specific on top to the most specific down below at the bottom, and your input matches the most specific and the least specific or something or somewhere in between, you may not get the results you're looking for. So just keep that in mind, that generally speaking, try to keep your most specific conditions first, and then your least specific down at the bottom of your condition list. So then you can ensure that you actually get the results that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and actually see what that would look like. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. So we can go ahead and say, let's see here. If I can get my... Okay. Okay. So let's change this 35 to a 30. And this 30 to a 35. All right. So in this case, these two conditions, 35 and 30, they're not exactly more specific than the other. However, because of where they are kind of like placed in terms of order, the order of the numbers, if it finds greater than or equal to 30 first, that's what it'll use. If it finds 35 first, and that meets the condition, then it meets what you want, then that's what it'll do. So now that we have those numbers flipped, let's run this again and see what we get. So let's say 23 or 32. Okay, let's try that again. Make sure that I'm doing this right. So we run this now. All right, cool. And then we can say, let's say 20, not 3, 23. Enter. Right. So it said you're old enough, and it also went and said, oh, you're old enough to run for Senate and House of Representatives. That's because we didn't change the, that's because we didn't change our, We didn't change our console write line statements, but you can see again that it found the first thing that it aligned with. And we can do this again by saying 30. And so you can see now when we did 30, it skipped over the first because it said, nope, that's not right. Skipped the else if because, again, it said, nope, that's not right. And then went down to the third and said, oh, okay, so this is right. So, yeah, it went, skipped the first, said, oh, yeah, this isn't right. You know, we're not in the third, we're not like 35 or anything like that. So it goes down. Then it says, oh, we're 30. That's great. Boom, execute that. And it just doesn't do anything for the else. Alright. So that's kind of how the if, else if, and else works. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.